This is the story of Rehoboam and Jeroboam, the divided kingdom. You can find this story in the Bible in 1 Kings 12, verse 1 to 24, and in 2 Chronicles chapter 9 to 11. After Solomon's death, all of Israel gathered at Shechem to make Solomon's son, Rehoboam, king. The covenant needed to be renewed for everyone, and Shechem was located centrally in Israel. Jeroboam had returned from hiding and found that he was no longer in danger. He already knew that he would be king over the 10 tribes of Israel. Rehoboam must have felt humiliated. When he arrived there, he heard the people complaining about the yoke which his father Solomon had laid upon them. The people did not complain about Solomon's unfaithfulness to the Lord, but they did complain about how much they had to give towards the kingdom. They didn't see that when God blesses his people, they are to use his gifts for God's honor. All they could talk about was the cost. Solomon's building projects did cost a large amount of money. He also demanded a lot of hours of work for the people, and they also had to give a portion of their harvest. They forgot that it was God who blessed them with all these things in the first place. Rehoboam got some advice from 2 different groups. The older people advised him to be cautious and to compromise with the people. Give them what they want, settle things down. Be a servant to the people. The younger adults, who were the same age as Rehoboam, did not know what it was like to suffer or to do without necessities. They had grown up in times of riches and luxury, and they wanted to keep it that way. They didn't want to compromise. And so the people were split in how they wanted Rehoboam to rule the people. Rehoboam chose to listen to the younger men. He was already irritated because he had to come to Shechem. He did not want to humble himself any further. His refusal to humble himself showed that he did not see the sin of his father Solomon in falling away from the Lord. He should have taken the time to ask God for advice. He should have been willing to humble himself for God's sake. If he had done this, he would have been a king after God's own heart. Instead, he chose to speak like a tyrant. This reflected badly on his father Solomon, who did not set a good example for his son, Rehoboam. His response to the people was, "My little finger is thicker than my father's waist." He wanted to show the people that he was in control and that he would be even harsher and more demanding than his father Solomon. Because Rehoboam was so harsh with the people, they revolted. They shouted, "What share do we have in David's family?" They had not the slightest bit of thankfulness for David's accomplishments. They didn't want anything to do with the tribe of Judah, which David had come from. The people turned completely away from David. Then they also turned away from Rehoboam. They threw stones at Rehoboam's treasurer when he tried to persuade them to come back. The king had to get into his chariot in great haste and flee to Jerusalem. The people had willfully rejected the Lord's covenant. Shouldn't the Lord have rejected Israel? No, God refused to abandon them. After a while, in God's timing, he would judge Israel. Jeroboam, the new king of the 10 tribes of Israel, led the people into sin. As a result, they did not flourish under Jeroboam. Meanwhile, Rehoboam tried to be a good king. He provided safety for the people by building strong cities and by giving them the weapons they might need for battle. He wanted to take an army into Judah to have war, but God told him not to. The Lord told Rehoboam that this division in Israel was his plan. Rehoboam went back home and obeyed God. Many of the people remained faithful to the service of the Lord in the first 3 years of Rehoboam's reign. But after a few years, when Rehoboam was firmly in control over the people of Judah, and when everything was going well, the people again forgot about God. Solomon had put up many places to sacrifice other gods. Then Shishak, the king of Egypt, who did not like the Israelites, saw that Judah was weak, and he saw a chance to take advantage of them. He did not want to keep the old alliance with Israel. He needed gold, and knew that Rehoboam still had some left over from his father's riches. The prophet Shemaiah came to visit the elders of Judah to tell them why God allowed the king of Egypt to come. God is trying to turn the hearts of the people back to him. Serving the Lord is top priority. The leaders of the people humbled themselves before God. The tribe of Judah became subjects to Shishak and would have to pay tribute. They were no longer free to make their own decisions. God's punishment affected the wealth of the people. All the gold that Solomon had gathered was taken away by the king of Egypt. Despite living in Jerusalem, near the temple, Rehoboam did not seek the Lord with all his heart.